Learning the fourth Sikha of Parshas Naso in Chelek Yud Ches on page 76. This is a Rashi Sikha regarding the pasuk that's the introduction for Birchas Kayanim, and the Rabbi will give us here a deeper insight into the bracha of Birchas Kayanim, as we'll see here, based on the yukim, on certain nuances in the words of Rashi that he explains here. This shir is being learned Lil Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. By the mitzvah of Birchas Kayanim, when it comes to the mitzvah of Birchas Kayanim, which is Kai Sevarcho es b'nei Yisrael Omer Lahem, so you should bench the Yidden Omer Lahem, saying to them. So Rashi focuses on these two words, Omer Lahem. Is Rashi mefarish the verter? So Rashi explains these two words and he quotes from the pasuk Omer Lahem. What does this mean? Kemoi, Zacher, Shomer. The word Omer is similar to the word Zacher and Shomer. In Bala is descent. In Old French, it's descent. So the Rebbe will soon spell out more what this Rashi is saying, as we'll see. Then Rashi quotes again the words Omer Lahem from the pasuk. Omer Lahem means Sheyiu Kulam Shaimim. Say it to them that all Yidden should be able to hear the bracha. Then Rashi quotes again the word Omer without Lahem, just Omer from the pasuk. And he says, Mole. The word Omer is written fully. It's spelled out Aleph, Mem, Vav, Reish. It has the Vav there. Sometimes Omer could be written without the Vav. Here it's written full. And what the pasuk is saying is, Lo yisavarchem b'chipazon or b'beholus. The bracha should not be in haste and with distraction or with confusion. Ela b'kavana, it should be with concentration, or b'leiv shalom, and with a whole heart. So let's see over here what Rashi is doing, and especially the first thing the Rebbe focuses on is the order of how Rashi explains these two words, Omer Lahem. There are three different Rashis quoting the words Omer Lahem three times, or actually quoting Omer Lahem twice, and then the third time quoting Omer, explaining these words. So what is the order over here in Rashi? From this, that was by jeden von die drei Pirushim is Rashi meitig from Pasik. Three times Rashi is explaining here, and he brings from the pasuk zweimal Omer Lahem. So he quotes twice the two words Omer Lahem, or neinmal Omer, and then the last time once he quotes just the word Omer. Is muchach as yede pirish that each one of these Rashis that he's explaining here, the pasuk, is masber abazunder inyan in dem lashon hamotek. He's explaining a separate aspect of the words that he's quoting from the pasuk. So that's clear why it's divided into three different Rashis, even though it's all focused on the same word, but it's three different aspects of these words that Rashi is explaining. The question, however, is, wie bald as in die erste zwei diburi amaschel is a mefarish euch dem Wort Omer Lahem. The first two Rashis where he explains the pasuk, he quotes the words Omer and Lahem together. Und in dem dritten Dibra Maschel, then in the third Rashi, is a mefarish no de Wort Omer allein. He only quotes the word Omer without the word Lahem. Hat doch Rashi gedacht maktim sein, dem dritten Pirish Omer. So seemingly Rashi should first explain just the word Omer alone, that comes first, that the word Omer is written full, spelled out with the Vav and so on. Far the erste zwei Pirushim, before he explains the two words Omer Lahem, which Rashi explains first. From them Gufa is move on. So from the order of the way it's explained there in Rashi, that the explanation for the word Omer itself comes last, as Chach Yed Pirish is an inyan b'fnei atzma. Even though these three Rashis are explaining a separate point of these words, darfen sie aber kommen in dem Seder. However, it's being explained specifically in the order that Rashi explains them. Die Schwierigkeit, was wird bewarnt mit dem dritten Pirish, the difficulty that Rashi is addressing in the third explanation here of the pasuk, kommt davke nach de friedige zwei Pirushim. Only comes up and has to be addressed after Rashi explains previously in the other two Rashis, Omer Lahem, Zacher v'Shomer, Omer Lahem, Shiyu Kulam Shaimim, then comes up the question and the explanation of Omer in the third Rashi. So what's the pshat in this? What's the order over here in these Rashis, the way it's presented? Beis, Sif Beis that is, dem ersten Pirish von Rashi. So now let's focus on the first Rashi here, where he says that Zacher v'Shomer, that Omer is compared to Zacher v'Shomer. K'moi Zacher v'Shomer. Then a Mefarshim Masber. So the Mefarshim here explain what Rashi is clarifying with this. As Rashi bavarent, die Schwierigkeit in dem Wort Omer. That there's something that's difficult, there's something that's very unusual about the word Omer. Was is nit beloshen tzivui nor beloshen hoive. It's not a word which means a command to say, to do something, Nar b'lashon hayve, it's in present tense. Other makir, or it means the source of a concept. Meaning over here, if we're talking about amira, which means saying or speaking, the word amar does not mean you shall speak, but rather amar means the concept of speaking. Amar, amira, the concept of speaking. And as the Rabbi explains here, the aleph is nit mitasegel. The aleph in the word amar is not written as emar. Emar would mean a command. You shall say. Which would be imru. It's also not written, since we're speaking to all the kainim, it's not written with a chirik under the aleph and in a plural with a vav at the end of the word, which is imru, that you all shall say. No, with hakometz. Rather, it's written with hakometz, which means either in present tense, saying to them, or amar means the concept of saying. So why does the Torah write in such a strange way, amar lahem, which seemingly should be a command? It's Rashi mevayer, so therefore Rashi explains as follows. And here there are two different approaches in Mefarshim, what Rashi means to say when he compares amar to zacher and shomer. So like Gevissim Mefarshim, according to some commentaries, what Rashi is saying is as follows. As amar is the takenit kinsivoy. The word amar here is actually not a command. Not a lashon haive. It's a word which means present tense. Amar means saying to them, that you will be saying to them. Und das ist nicht kein Ausnahme. And the fact that the Torah uses here such an expression of present tense is not an exception. Das ist wie Zacher and Shomer. It's like the other expressions that we find in the Torah, Zacher and Shomer. Was lashon haive, they're also present tense. When es kommt b'mokim tzivui, it's being written instead of using an expression that means a command. Weist as the amire dav zayin tomid. So what the reason the Torah is not writing it as a command, but rather it's writing it in present tense, saying to them, is because what it's saying is that this amira of birchas kainim should be constant. How do we see that in the Zocher that it's constant? Rashi by Zocher, and Rashi explained this earlier regarding the word Zocher, that Tnu Leiv Liskar Tamid. When it comes to Shabbos, so the Torah did not write Zichor with a Shiva, but it wrote Zocher with a Kometz. So there it also means a constant present tense that a person should constantly remember Shabbos. Even during the week, when he sees good food that he could use for Shabbos, as the Rebbe quotes later in one of the footnotes that Rashi says there, that he should always remember Shabbos. So over here as well, Omar Lahem is being written here in a present tense because it's not just a command of saying the bracha to the Yidden, but it's also saying that it should be constant. That's one approach in Mefarshim. Andere Mefarshim learning about other commentaries say, as agam Omar mitakomitz is nit ken lashon tzivui, that the word Omar is not a command, is thus der Makir. This is a makir, meaning this is the concept of saying. When Rashi sagt, al derech hanal, what Rashi is saying is, as megifint in the Torah, we find in the Torah der makir oich bayatzivi, that the Torah does use an expression of makir, of the concept of this word that it's speaking about, even when it's talking about a command. Kamoi zacher shamer, just like it is with zacher and shamer, v'zen and makir. They are words that are being written also about the concept of remembering, the concept of safeguarding. Chach zer mechuven is tzivui, even though it's simply a command. Right? So according to these mefarshim, the word amar is not written as the right vowelization of the word amar, not emar, is not being written as a tzivui, but nevertheless, it really is a command. The point there is a command, but nevertheless, we find that sometimes when the Torah gives a command, it will use an expression which refers to the concept of what that command is about. Over here, saying, or remembering, or safeguarding, even though it really means you shall say. However, according to what all these Mefarshim here say, it's still difficult to understand this Rashi. In addition to other difficulties here. If Rashi is only explaining the difficulty with this one word of Amar, that it says Amar and not Emar. Why does Rashi quote the word lahem as well? Why doesn't Rashi just say very concisely Amar kamay zacher shamer, that the term Amar with the comments Amar is like zacher and shamer? Euch darf man verstehen. Another question here is, was bringt Rashi zwei Dugmais? Why is Rashi bringing two examples for the Torah using this kind of expression? Zachar and Shamer, both the word Zachar and Shamer. Es ist nicht genug die Dugme von Zachar allein oder Shamer allein. And Rashi is not satisfied by bringing either the word Zachar alone or the word Shamer alone. And then zweiten Pirish from Rashi, so now moving on to the next Pirish that Rashi says in this pasuk, Omer Lahem, so Rashi says, Sheyekulam Shaimim. All Yidden should hear the bracha. Is bepashtus the kavana. So simply, Rashi's intention here is, Vimefarshim Taichin, as the commentaries here say, as Muzal Nitmeinen, one should not think, as the Kayin can zagen the Birchas Kayinim Beinoyle Ben Atzmai, that a Kayin could say the Birchas Kayinim between him and himself. He doesn't have to include others. The Yidden don't have to hear this. Avalbi is the call, but Niteren, and the people, the congregation, will not hear this. Nor Sadav Zayin, Omar Lahem. Shiyu kulam shaimin. You should say it to them, and they should all hear the bracha that's being said to them. That's what Rashi is explaining here. Isn't it move on? But if that's the point of Rashi, so there's the following difficulties. Aleph, number one, miman avshach. Either way you want to explain this Rashi, it will not be understood. Oib Rashi's limud is from vart lahem. If Rashi is taking the fact that all Yidden should be able to hear this from the word lahem, which is shiyu kulam shaimim, that everybody should be able to hear, that's what lahem means. We're focusing on the Yidden, that they could hear. Darfon it meitig sein dem Wort emor. So therefore, Omer rather. So Rashi does not have to quote the word Omer from the pasuk. Rashi could quote just the word lahem, which is extra and refers to the Yidden that have to listen, and explain. Lahem means that they should listen. On the other hand, though, oib derayv from Rashi is oich from Wort Omer. If Rashi's proof that the point there is that Yidden should be able to hear this is also from the word Omer as well, that they should speak. When you speak, speaking loud enough that Yidden should hear, as the Amire dav zayin and an from Tzukum and Lahem, that you should speak. It should be like when a person speaks and communicates, that the Amire should actually reach them. Don't talk to yourself. The Amira means when you're talking to someone else. And that's the reason why Rashi is saying that they have to listen, they have to hear, the Yidden should hear it. So the diok is from the word Omer itself. So if was das is l'chayre mer mistaver, and the Rebbe points out that saying that Rashi's source is from the word Amira, Omer, this makes more sense. Varim es is mer masim zum teichen a pasik. It fits better with the content of the pasuk here. Was read wegen the Amira von the Kayanim. The focus of this pasuk is the Kayanim. It's talking about the mitzvah to the Kayanim, what they have to say. Nid wegen Shmias b'nei Yisrael. The pasuk is not focusing on the Yidden listening. Rashi's lashon gedav zayin be'esen to them. If so, Rashi's lashon should be focusing on the Kayanim, how they should be saying it. Al derech v'lashon haGemara. Similar to the lashon that the Gemara says about this, as the Amire dav zayin b'kol ram, that they should speak loud enough that it should be able to be heard. So, in other words, there's two aspects to this. There is the command to the Kayanim, how they should be speaking when they say the bracha, and then there is the focus on the Yidden, how they should be able to hear. But if the main focus of this pasuk is Omer, a mitzvah to the Kayanim, how they are saying the brachas, so Rashi as well should be focusing on the Kayanim, how they're saying the brachas. Why is Rashi focusing on the Yidden, how they're listening to the brachas? There is another difficulty here on this Rashi is, Vibalt as Rashi main shaylo zayin as the brachas zol nit zayin beinom lebein atzmam. Since Rashi comes to negate that they should not give the bracha just saying it between themselves, that only they themselves could hear the bracha that they are saying. So why doesn't Rashi spell that out that way clearly? Similar to what Rashi negates and explains in the next Rashi, that they should not bench in haste. So over here as well, Rashi should say clearly that the bracha should not be quietly between themselves. That's exactly what it says in the Sifri and Gemara. It uses this expression that it should not be beinam lebein atzmam, giving them a clear command how not to give the bracha, that it should not be between themselves. If the Gemara and Sifri uses this expression, so for sure Rashi should say it this way as well. Madach in Sifri and Gemara, if when it comes to the Sifri and the Gemara. The Gemara is speaking to a 10-year-old which learns Mishnayos, or even more so, a 15-year-old that learns Gemara. So the Gemara spells out that what this means is that they should not say it like speaking to themselves. or saying it quietly. So definitely Rashi should spell it out in the same way, Omer lahem, that the Kohanim should not speak low or should not speak like they're talking to themselves. Why doesn't Rashi spell it out this way, the way the Gemara does? Gimel, the third and final question here is on this Rashi. Why does Rashi use the expression here that they should all be listening or all hear? Und touching it up, and Rashi does not spell out who's this kulam that he's referring to, who's everybody. Now, even though seemingly it's self-understood who everybody is, this follows what it said earlier in the pasuk. You should bench all Yidden and you should saying to them, so obviously we're not talking about all of Klal Yisrael in any place in the world. No, the Yidden by Samayim, that refers to those Yidden that are there in that place when they're benching those Yidden. So it's understood who the Kulam is. But nevertheless, wouldn't it be better when Rashi zogt, if Rashi says it, al derech v'deloshen in Sifri, like it says it in the Sifri, shiyeh kol hakol, Rashi should use an expression that refers, that's more clear, that all assembled, the whole congregation assembled, should listen, or something similar. Why does Rashi use a more vague expression of kulam, everybody, that everybody should listen? Who's this everybody Rashi is referring to with this expression? Moving on to the third Rashi, in the written Pirish, Omoir Malay, that the word Omoir is written full, with a Vav, Leisavarchim b'chapazim b'bahalos, should not bench Yidden in haste or with confusion, Ela b'chavana b'leiv shalom, with concentration and with a whole heart. Darf man verstehen, so this Rashi is also difficult to understand. So Aleph number 1, Vishin Geret Kama Pamim, it was already mentioned many times as the Shinui from Malay v'chaser. The difference is in the spelling of words in Torah, whether it's spelled fully with a vav or other letters that are full, or it's missing a letter. Nit ken kushi and pshuta mikra was Rashi musfa'amfen. It's not a question in the simple pshat of the pasuk that Rashi must address. V'adarab, on the contrary, beruba deruba from verte b'chumish was then in malaya dechaser. In most cases, when it comes to words in the Torah that are either spelled full or missing a letter, stellt sich Rashi auf dem detaf. Rashi does not stop and address this. Seiden, unless when there is another question that comes up in the simple understanding of the pasuk, which is explained by the fact that the Torah adds or misses a letter. Then Rashi addresses it. But otherwise, Rashi does not address the fact that the word is written full. If so, the question is, what here is not understood in the pasuk that Rashi says that by the Torah writing Omar full with a vav, it answers that question. Another question here on this Rashi is, why would I even have a thought to think as the Kohanim sollen benchen Yidden b'chapazin b'bahalas, that the Kohanim are going to bench Yidden in haste and with confusion. Amazol des dafen bavaran, the Torah has to come here and command specifically and warn that they should not do so. Why would Kohanim give such a kind of bracha? In Medrash state, so the Medrash also talks about this, and the Medrash says, Amalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Kohanim. The Eibusha says to the Kohanim, Loi mipnei she'amarti lachem, she'tiyu mevarchem es Yisrael, so don't think that because I am telling you, I'm commanding you to bench the Yidden, that tiyu mevarchem ha'isam v'angarya u'bebahalas, that you should bench them like someone that's coercing you into doing this, and with confusion. Rather, give the bracha with a full heart. Give the bracha with a full concentration. That's what the Medrash here says. Now, what does this Medrash mean? Was the Pirish hapashit in them is, sorry. So the simple pshat of this Medrash is, wie Mefarshim and a Masber, as the Mefarshim explain, as wie bald, as der Eibishter hat ibegegeben die Kohanim, as they sollen benchen the Yidden. Since the Kohanim are not coming and benching the Yidden with their own initiative, with their own desire. Rather, they're here, Hashem is commanding them that you must go ahead and bench Yidden. So as it happens many times when someone else comes and commands you to do something, even if you're not necessarily ready to do so, they may come and say, Hashem wants us to bench, even though I'm not interested, but they may do so quickly and even yelling to get it over with, to do what Hashem wants, even if they're not ready to do so. And that's why the pasuk has to come and spell out, even though I'm the one, Hashem says, even though I'm the one commanding you to bench, Nevertheless, you should bench on your own with a full heart and with full concentration. That's what the Medrash explains. However, we can't say that this is what Rashi means. Warum? If so, damals wollte das gesagt in klare Werte. Rashi would spell it out like the Medrash explains here, that this is what the pasuk is bavarning. This is what the pasuk is saying, that don't bench just because I'm commanding you to get it over with, but bench with a full heart. In the language of Rashi, chapazim bebahalis, it doesn't seem like that this is what Rashi is saying. It's also self-understood. What it says in the Medrash, in the simple pshat of the pasuk, this is not something that has to be clarified to the Kohanim. We already learned the mitzvah about you have to love your fellow exactly like yourself. Is punkt wie der Kohen will. So like this Kohen himself would want. As b'shas men benched him. If someone is benching him, don't bench me in haste, bench with a full heart. So it's already understood from that mitzvah that when he benches another Yid, that he has to bench another Yid in the same way like he desires for himself. So that doesn't need an extra clarification here in this pasuk. You also can't say the following. As the is that the reason you may have thought that you could bench in haste or you bench with the confusion would be as follows. If the Eibishter is giving a command to bench the Yidden, so that itself will confuse them. The very fact that Hashem himself is coming and giving a mitzvah, giving you a mitzvah to bench, this itself is overwhelming, and this itself could confuse you. Something similar to this, similar to confusion. So in other words, the very fact that Hashem is commanding you, Hashem, the master of the universe, coming to command you to do something is very overwhelming. So we can't say that's what Rashi is clarifying. If it's necessary to clarify that when you get a mitzvah from Hashem, don't feel overwhelmed, as the Rebbe's at Tzivis on the Hashem's command should not cause you to be confused and to be overwhelmed. Hat es die Teire gedarf bewahren gleich bei die erste mitzvahs, was der Rebbe hat angesagt in Parshas Boi v'chulu. So then this should be clarified by the first mitzvahs that Hashem gives Yidden, which comes in Parshas Boi. Und nicht erst by the mitzvah from Birchas Kohanim in Parshas Naso, and not wait until here, until this mitzvah of Birchas Kohanim, much later in the Teire in Parshas Naso. Gimel, another question there is, was is Rashi eisen mit sein Diak zu sagen beide l'shainis? What's Rashi's intention when he uses the precise two details here, which are b'chapazin and b'bahalis? Don't bench in haste and with confusion. And from wann nimmt das? From where does Rashi take these two different points here? Dalid, the fourth and final question on this Rashi is, al derech zeh is the shaila b'negeya the tzvei l'shainis from Rashi in tzad achiyuv. Rashi also uses two expressions when it comes to the positive of how a kohen should bench. B'chavana with concentration, ubelev shalem, and with a whole heart. What are these 2 points? Ubefrat, as a medrash shtei takenar, ein loshen. B'chavana salev, the medrash that says similar to Rashi, only uses one of these two expressions. It just says, with concentration of your heart. So why does Rashi say two different expressions here? So we have many, many questions on these few Rashis here. The Rebbe wants to understand the order of these Rashis, and then the Omar Lahem. The Omar, when Rashi expresses and explains that is, the word Omar, why it says Omar and not Emar, why does Rashi quote the word Lahem as well? And the same in the next Rashi. Rashi quotes the two words Omar Lahem. Why is Rashi quoting these two words? What's the meaning of Kulam? Kulam Shaimim. Everybody should listen. And we're focusing on the Yidden listening, not on the Kohen saying, the way they're going to bench. What's this Kulam Shaimim? And also, Chipazim, Bahalas, Kavana, Belev Shalem. Why do we have to bavara such a thing, B'chlal? Why would I think a Kohen would not bench properly with a full heart? What are all of these expressions in Rashi? So basically, almost every single word in these Rashis are difficult to understand. So to explain all of this, so the point is as follows. Starting with the first Rashi. The Hechrech von Rashi, as the Pirish von Omar is Kamoi Zacha v'Shameh. This, what brings Rashi to say that the word Omar, with the komets, is similar to Zachar and Shamer. Is from them, was the pasuk sagt, Omar Lahem. It's actually from this that it says both words together, not only Omar, but it says Omar and Lahem. Und the Fahr is meitig beide Werte. And that's why Rashi quotes both of these words from the pasuk. two words that Rashi quotes, so B'chlal, every Dibra Maschal of Rashi is always the key to understanding what question Rashi is coming to address in the pasuk. So here, Rashi is addressing both words together. Omer lehem. Wenn es wollt gestanden der Loschen, Koi sevarchu es b'nei Yisrael, Omer. If the pasuk would simply say, so you should bench the Yidden, Omer. So how would I translate the word Omer? Volt men gelernt bepashtus. I would simply say, as Omer is nit kein sivui. The word Omer is not a command, not a lashon mocker. It's a language which means the concept of saying. Und der Pirish from pasuk volt gewen. And then the meaning of the pasuk would be, Azai sollt ihr benchen the Yidden. So you should bench the Yidden. And what does Omer mean? Zogendig. And you will be saying, Yivarechacha goymer. You will be saying the following nusach of Yivarechacha. So it's not commanding you. Omer is not saying, you shall bench, you shall say as follows. It already said before the command. Kaisavarchu, that's the command. What's Omer? Omer is just saying, when you will bench, the nusach will be so and so. Omer is saying the following words of Yivarechacha. But it's not, Omer is not a command at all. So then there's no difficulty with the word Omer. The fact that it says with a kometz and not with a segel. It's because Omer here just means you will be saying the following nusach. But the pasuk says Omer lehem, which means saying to them. Is this a signum from tzivui? That's words that does mean a command that you shall say to them. Al derech, one example we find, lo yitam lehem, do not become tomei to them. So Esht Frier, which was not long before here in the Parsha. Many other times you find similar in the Torah. So when the Torah adds the word Omer Lahem, so here the word Omer is not simply telling you this is what you will be saying, this is the nusach of the bracha. Omer Lahem is actually a command. This is what you shall say to them, to the Yidden. So therefore, here the question comes up. Therefore, if so, the question comes up. Why does it use the term Omer b'lashon makir, the concept of saying with a kometz? Unid b'lashon sivui. Why doesn't it use the expression which means a command, mitasegel? With a segel, which would be emoir, or the imru, chirik, which would mean a command. A lashon makir, using the expression of Omer, which is a makir, the concept of saying, or a lashon sivui, or a language that means a command about something that's active, that you do, or say in this case, are totally different. Usually when you talk about a concept, there's a concept of saying. That negates an action. We're not talking about anything active, we're just talking about the concept. So over here, if it is a command, why does the Torah use an expression which just means the concept of saying? Rashi, so this is what Rashi explains. Aschach Omer Lehem is atzivui. The words Omer Lehem is a command, as we understand from the word Lehem that it's a command. Von deswegen kann stehen b'lashon makir. Nevertheless, the word Omer can be written with the kometz, Omer mit kometz, which means the concept of saying, k'may zacher shomer, because it's similar to the two words of zacher and shomer. Punkt by zacher und shomer, just like it is with these two words of zacher and shomer. Is der mechuven at sivui. The intention there is a command. Undach steht es b'lashon makir, but nevertheless the Torah writes it as a makir, which means the concept of remembering or safeguarding. The far, and the reason the Torah does that is, was das weiß der Faninyan Tmidi, because the Torah there wants to tell you that the remembering or guarding is something which is constant. Rashi is dort mefarish, as Rashi explained there, as the Rebbe quoted before, that tnu leiv lisker tamid regarding Shabbos to constantly remember. So to over here, the same is over here with this command, Omer Lehem, to say, to bench the Yidden with Birchas Kainim, as das is gesagt geworden b'lashon makir, even though it is a command, but the Torah uses an expression which means the concept of saying, mitzadem tam, was Birchas Kainim is an inyan tmidi, because Birchas Kainim is also a mitzvah which is constant. So that's why the Torah writes it in this expression, because this clarifies a detail regarding the mitzvah, that the mitzvah should be constant. Based on this, that the Torah is writing the command in this language, which means the concept of saying, in order to clarify that this is constant, we understand why Rashi has to have two different examples to explain this, both Zachar and Shomer. The Raya from Zachar allein is nit genug. The proof from the word Zachar alone is not sufficient. Varam bishloime by Zachar. Over there, in the case of the word Zacher, it's understood, is Masim Aloshem Makir Eifin Sivui. To use the term Zacher, which means the concept of remembering, regarding a command, that could be understood. Over there, it actually does mean you should remember Shabbos constantly. Keep Shabbos in mind constantly. Rashi Taich, as Rashi there says, you should constantly have in your heart to remember about Shabbos. It doesn't mean when someone actively or consciously remembers something, nor the nisin slave, lisker tamid, about paying attention, about a person constantly being aware of the fact that Shabbos is coming, that he has to prepare for Shabbos. As the Rabbi brings here in the Ha'ara, regarding a fact that refers to when whatever a person is doing, he's going to the store to buy food, be aware constantly that Shabbos is coming and you should be buying food for Shabbos. So even if you're not actively and consciously remembering, but you're always aware and having that in mind that Shabbos is coming, so you're remembering Shabbos constantly. So over there, it literally means constantly. Is doch das an inyan was is nit mugbel in azman mesuyim. So therefore, this is something that's not limited to any time. Mashenk in dem tzivui Omer Lahem. But over here, when the Torah is speaking about the mitzvah of Birchas Kainim, and it says the term Omer Lahem, Birchas Kainim retach nit wegen an inyan tmidi. This is not something which is constant. No wegen zmanim kvuim bashana. This is a mitzvah that comes up in set times during the year. And even if we are to say that in the simple pshat of the pasuk, this mitzvah of Birchas Kainim is daily, is this dachfart nit mervi einmal in tag. It's a mitzvah of once a day to bench the yidden. And it's not as constant as it is by the mitzvah of Zacher, which is constantly to have the awareness of Shabbos coming. So therefore, who says we could compare the Amar here to Zachar, that the Torah writes it in this lashon of Makir, to say that it's constant? It's not as constant as it is by Zachar. The Rebbe bringt Rashi the Raya von Oich von Shomer. So Rashi proves and says we find this also regarding the word Shomer, to guard. Was in dem, was Rashi sagt bepashtus, Zachar, and then Rashi says Shomer, when is dit mitzayim, welcher meint? He just says these two words, which just means remembering and guarding, and he doesn't tell you which two words of Zachar and Shomer he's referring to, is muchach az batzitzech zu die Lishaine Zachar and Shomer, was matching gelernt, und was hat Shayches zwischen sich. He's referring to the two words of Zachar and Shomer that was already learned before. Zachar we learned before, that was clearly in the pasuk in Parshas Yisrael, and Shomer, Rashi quoted it in Parshas Yisrael. Und das is the Zachar v'Shomer by Shabbos. And this refers to the Zachar and Shomer of Shabbos. So over here, regarding the Shomer of Shabbos, you see that the Torah uses this term Shomer, which means the concept of safeguarding, even though it's not as constant as it is by Zachar. Shmiras Shabbos is nit kem pu'ula v'inyan tmidi. Guarding, keeping Shabbos is not an action, and it's not something that's constant like when it comes to remembering that Shabbos is coming. When do you keep Shabbos? On the day of Shabbos. You don't work and you keep Shabbos. And yet, state that the Torah uses the command to keep Shabbos using the expression of Shomer, which means the concept of safeguarding. Shomer mit akometz was weist auf an inyan tmidi, indicating that this is something constant. So from here we have a proof as oicha pu'ula ve'inyan. Even regarding an action or something or concept which is not constant, not every moment, but because this is something which is done constantly, meaning in set times that are constantly there, pastiv them lashon makir. So it's fitting to use this expression of lashon makir, that this is not just a tzivoy, but this is also the concept of guarding, because this is constant. And the same thing here regarding Amr La'am, the concept of saying the bracha, because this is a mitzvah that the Kayanim will be doing on a constant and steady basis. So that's why Rashi brings the word Shomer. On the other hand, though, the Raya from Shomer Alein is noch wenige Raya from Zachar. The proof, though, from the word Shomer, that the Torah uses this term because it's talking about something which is constant or steady, is even less of a proof than the word Zachar. Rashi does bring the proof from the word Zachar first. Keeping Shabbos is not even an action at all. It's not something active that a person does. No shlila. It's negating. It's stopping to work by keeping Shabbos. Or b'meile, so if so, you can actually say on the opposite than we said before. So then one could say, as dafke dort pasta loshem moker, that it's specifically regarding Shemiras Shabbos, which is not an action at all, that it makes more sense why the Torah uses the term of shamoir, which means a loshem moker, the concept of guarding. The actual fulfillment of keeping Shabbos is only once a week, but Yom Shabbos dafka, on the day of Shabbos when you don't work. However, the content, the concept of not working, that you have in every moment of time, and that's even during the week. Even when a person works during the week, he's keeping Shabbos. How's he keeping Shabbos? He's not working on Shabbos. The very fact that a person is working 6 days a week and he's not working the seventh day, so if the way you keep Shabbos is by not working on that seventh day of Shabbos, so every one of the 6 days of the week that you're only working on those 6 days and not working on Shabbos, so you're really always, conceptually, the content of this inyan, you're not working on Shabbos. So therefore, in that sense, Shomer is something that's literally constantly. The Rebbe is the Erste on Ikeraye, so therefore the first and main proof that Rashi brings from Zocher, from the word Zocher, was is atnua chiyuvis von Gedenken. Zocher is a positive thing. It's a person is remembering. It's not just negating an action, but it's actually remembering. So it can't be as constant as when it comes to shomer, which is just negating not working, and that's something that you literally every moment are not working on the day of Shabbos. And even though Zacher is not as constant as shomer, but still, the Torah uses by Zacher the term of a lashon makir, which means the concept of remembering, indicating that this should be constantly during the week as well. And similar here, b'nigeya to Omer Lahem, it means an Inyan Tamidi, as the Rabbi explains. Val derech says, move on by Omer Lahem, and the same we understand regarding the mitzvah of Birchas Kayanim in the words Omer Lahem. As Chaj, the Pu'ula from Birchas Kayanim is nit ken Inyan Tamidi. Even though the mitzvah of Birchas Kayanim, which is an active thing that you go to bench, is not constant, nor bizman mesuyim, it's in set times. But because it has a constant, established time periods of when you bench, whether specific times during the year, or the Yedin Tag, or daily, Pastiv them the lashon makir. So you can use the term of lashon makir, the concept of saying was vaystav tamidus, indicating that this is a mitzvah which is constant. Similar to what you find when the Torah uses the term tamid regarding lighting the menorah. Because of this, that it was lit and it was burning every single night. Even though the menorah was not lit, it did not burn all 24 hours. So too here, the mitzvah of Birchas Kainim is considered to be a constant mitzvah just because of the fact that it has set times during the year or even daily that you have to bench the Yidden. That's what the Torah is telling you, or that's the pshat in these words, Omar Lahem, that this is a mitzvah that the Kainim, the Eibush is giving them to bench on a constant, steady basis. That's the first Rashi. But now based on this, comes up a difficulty which Rashi has to address moving forward in the next Rashis here. Now if so, the question is, wie bald as Saivi sagt die Torah nit dem Zman kavua vom Birchas Kainim. So nevertheless, the fact is the Torah does not give you the times. What are the set times of Birchas Kainim? And as we saw in what the Rebbe said before, in Pshuta Shel Mikra, it's not 100% clear if the mitzvah is certain times in the year or maybe daily. We know that it's constant because it says Omar Lahem, Lashon Makir. But how often, exactly when, it's not clear in the Torah at all. So if so, Tavas giben zu die Wörter Omer Lehem, so what are these words adding? Nachdem wie es steht schon der Ansag Koisevarchu as Bnei Yisrael. So if so, in the end of the day, what are these two words Omer Lehem adding to the mitzvah? Once the Torah says Koisevarchu as Bnei Yisrael, that they should bench Yidden with Birchas Kainim, and that's the mitzvah. So now Omer Lehem saying that it has steady times. When those steady times are, we have no idea. So what are these words adding here? It would be difficult to answer as follows. As maybe the words Kaisevarchu are not yet a command at all. What man betas gekent einteichen, you would maybe mistakenly interpret them to say, as Birchas Kayanim is an iyum von Rishus. Birchas Kayanim is just the Eibishter giving permission to the Kayanim to bench. Kais of Archu, if you want, this is how you do it. Other veni vedvelim, benchen is Kais of Archu. If you wish to bench, this is the Nusach, this is how you should bench. Azoi mit dem Nusach sollte benchen. You use this nusach to bench if you desire to bench Yidden. So maybe with the words Kaisav Archu, there was no command, there's no mitzvah to bench said yet here at all. Und der Rebbe is the Torah gleich meisif, so therefore the Torah adds the two words Omer lehem, saying to them, as das is atzivui. So here, these two words Omer lehem are not extra, they are actually clarifying and saying that this is not only a permission, or if you desire, this is how you shall do it, but it's actually a mitzvah that they should bench. So it's difficult to say that this is the way you read the pasuk. Why? If so, it should be written in the opposite order. First, the Torah should say the mitzvah, that the Kayanim have a mitzvah to bench. And danach, der prat, and then the Torah should say the detail of how you bench. As kois of aruchu, and when you are going to fulfill the mitzvah to bench, this is the details of the nusach habracha. Why would the Torah first say the details, the nusach of the bracha, and then afterwards clarify, and this is actually a mitzvah that you must do so? First the Torah should give the mitzvah, and then the nusach. So therefore we can't say that kois varchu itself is not yet the mitzvah. So if so, once it says kois varchu, what are the two words Omer lahem adding that we didn't know before? That's the problem here with these two words, Omer lahem. Beis, Nachmer, the question goes even further. Omer lehem is nit blois ayitu lashon l'chayre. They're not only two extra words. Narecha lashon was es bestire zum lashon habracha. They actually sort of contradict what the bracha itself is saying. The nusach habracha kula is b'lashon yachid. You look at the language of the bracha; it's all in singular term. Yivarecha v'gayme v'yishmerecha yarelecha v'chaneka yisa lecha lecha. It's all in singular. Benching every single yid individually. On Omer Lehem is a Lashon Rabbim. Here the Torah uses the term Lehem, referring to all Yidden as one together. That you're benching everyone together, not focusing on the individual. So what are these two words saying? From them is Rashi's Hechrech. So this is what brings Rashi to add in the second pshat of Rashi, where Rashi says, as da retzich nit nor wegen tzivoy of der amire ubracha mitzad kayanim. The pasuk, the words Omer lehem is not just the mitzvah that the Torah is giving to the kayanim Omer lehem. Certainly is also speaking to the Kayanim, that's the simple pshat of the pasuk, but because in that sense we don't really see what the pasuk is adding, so therefore it's not only the mitzvah to the Kayanim, nor oich an inyan versus negeya lehem, but it's also adding this because this is relevant for them, which is to the Bnei Yisrael, for the Yidden, the Shaimim, the ones that are listening to this bracha, that sheyiu kulam shaimim, that all the Yidden should listen to the bracha. So that's what the pasuk here is adding with the words Omer Lahem, also focusing on the listeners, on the Yidden. And what does Rashi mean by these words? Sheyiu kulam shaimim, that Yidden should listen to this bracha. So this answers the question that Rabbi asked before, why when Rashi explains Omer Lahem, Rashi doesn't focus on the Kayanim, that the Kayanim should be the one saying it loud and not speaking to themselves and so on. Because the fact that the Torah adds these words, Omer Lahem, the word Lahem, which is different than the word Lashon Yochid that the Torah says later in the Nusach of the Bracha, shows that it's focusing something unique about the Yidden, about Lahem, about the whole congregation of Yidden together. They should all be listening. Now what does this mean? The Bir in them, the explanation here is as follows. The Bracha from the Kayanim is Take B'Lashon Yochid. The bracha that Kayanim give to the Yidden is in a singular term. Das heißt, they benchen jeden Yid b'fnei atzmai als Yachid. The Kayanim, when they bench the Yidden, and there's many Yidden in the shul that they're benching, but they should focus on every individual that they're benching, everyone individually. L'yidach, however, here the Torah comes and clarifies on the other hand, darfen die Kayanim benchen and anayfen, that the Kayanim should bench Yidden in such a manner, with such a focus, that sheyiu kulam shaimim. What does this mean? That all are listening. As alle andere, that everybody else, der Yachid, and this individual himself, sollen herren wie der Yachid werd gebencht. They should all listen how this one individual is being benched, als kulam, als klal. And this individual is here as only one, being part of all of the whole congregation together. So the Torah here is saying that when the Kohanim are benching the Yidden, on one hand, they should be focusing on the individual, the bracha that every individual needs himself. That's why it says in B'lashon Yachid. But at the same time, though, they should also bench all Yidden with the Achdus, including everybody, that the Yachid is part of the Kulam, that Kulam Shaimim, that everybody's listening to the bracha together. So in other words, the Rebbe here is being Mechadash, an original, a completely new pshat in this Rashi. Kulam Shaimim is not just a matter of them not saying it, Beinam L'Beyam Atzmam, don't say the bracha low, in a way that nobody could hear, like it says in the Gemara, and that everybody should be able to hear it. Rashi is actually talking about the focus of the bracha, the kavanah of the bracha, that when you bench, besides benching every individual, bench also Yidden, including everybody together, focusing on all of Klal Yisrael, including them as one together. The mit is move on. Now, based on this, we can understand was dafke nach dem allen. After Rashi explains all of this, stellt sich Rashi auf ein Wort Amar. Here, Rashi now stops on the word Amar und sagt, and Rashi has to now address the word Amar. And Rashi says, Leisevarchem b'chapazan ubebahalas. The Kohanim should not bench in haste or with confusion. Why would I? So the Rebbe's question was, why is Rashi addressing this? Why would I think that the Kohanim would bench with confusion or with haste? So the answer is as follows: Vibalt as es darfen sein alle in Yonim zusammen. Since over here the Kohen has to do these few things together. The bracha und kavane for yed yachid. On one hand, the Kohen is benching and having in mind every individual for what he needs. On the bracha fahren klal. At the same time, the bracha that is necessary for all of Klal Yisrael together. Can es geirim sein? So this can cause, as the Kohen soll benchen b'chapazin, that the Kohen should come to bench in haste. What does haste mean? Kipshutay, literally. Es wird bei ihm sein, the chapazin, in the bracha, yivarechecha benchen dich. When he gives the bracha, and he's trying to focus on the individual, that I'm benching you, he may be very hurried by benching the individual because he has to immediately hurry to bench everybody together. Gewendet zu jeder von dem Kulam b'fnei atzmai. So he's benching and he's focusing and turning to each individual, benching him separately. But at the same time, he's going to be hurried. He's going to be rushed. Why? Hey, says darf mechaven sein euch wegen dem zweiten und dritten Yidden v'chulu. But he also has to have in mind that I'm benching another Yid. Und wegen Kulam, and he has to bench all Yidden together. So he has to bench, thinking and having in mind every individual Yid, his needs, and the Eibusha should give every individual Yid what his needs are. And at the same time, all the Klal Yisrael. So he's going to be very hurried in Kipshutai, in the Kavanas that he has to have over here in the Brachas. That's why Rashi uses the term b'chipazin, that is going to be rushed by this. And also Rashi uses the term ubahalis, which means melashim bachel, that he's going to be confused or distracted, or balol, he's going to get mixed up. Wird sein zu tumult und zu mischt, he's going to get confused and distracted mitzadim merere kavanis, because he has to have so many different kavanis. You have to focus on the bracha for every individual of what he needs, and you have to also bench all of Klal Yisrael for what Klal Yisrael needs. So that could be confusing, of all these kavanas together at the same time in these few words of the brachas that he's saying. So we understand why Rashi uses these two words, v'chapazin and bahalas. It's exact and precise. And why we would even think that a Kohen should bench b'chapazin or b'bahalas. It's because of all these kavanas here. The Rebbe sagt Rashi, so therefore Rashi says, steht Amar Male. So the Torah writes Amar, writing the word full with the Vav there. Varam dod av zainat goshim uyuchedes. There's a special emphasis here, as a soll sein di amira b'milua ushlemusa. That the bracha should be said fully and complete, as a soll sein b'chavane b'leiv shalom. And here again, Rashi uses two expressions, that he should concentrate on the bracha, and he should do it with a full heart, with a whole heart. What are the 2 points Rashi here is saying? As davzai mit kavane. So number one, it should be with the proper kavane. Saifa yed yochid, having in mind the needs of every individual in this bracha. On saifar and klal, and at the same time having the kavane, the proper kavane necessary for the whole klal. That's what we understand from lahem, the lashon rabbim, including everybody together. Biyachad zeh, and together with this, zolazain unbillable, without any confusion. Now believe shalom, with a whole heart. What is Rashi bavaroning by a whole heart? Das heißt, what this means is that Kohen kann doch trachten. The Kohen may think to himself, as we bald darf benchen a ganzen Eide Yidden. He has to bench a whole congregation of Yidden, wird die Yidden benchen mit a Chelek von sein Hart. So to make it easier, he has to focus on so many different individuals that he has to bench, so he's going to bench every Yid. You can't be totally focused completely on one person for all his needs. he's going to focus on each person and think a little bit about what this person needs and a little bit about another person, a little bit, but not give his full heart and full attention to every individual in the bracha for what that person needs. That's what a Kayin may think in order to make this possible, or in order to make it easier for himself. When you have to have this kavanah for every individual and also for Klal Yisrael, but it should be for every individual and your full heart should be there focused on him. As jeder Yid darf benchen mit sein ganzes Herz. To bench every single individual Yid with your entire heart, fully focused on the bracha that you're giving to this individual Yid. Unbelievable. So this really gives us a whole new insight into the depth of the bracha of Birchas Kainim and the kind of mitzvah that and the focus that the Kainim have to have in the bracha of Birchas Kainim, focusing on every individual Yachid, Belev Shalom, and at the same time also including all of Klal Yisrael Ba'achdos together at one. This is not such an easy mitzvah, and this is all focusing and concentrating and with a full heart. From Yeina Shal Taira B'Pirish Rashi. Now to see the wine of Torah, the secrets of Torah that you have here, the deeper understanding of this Rashi. The zwei Dugmais, the two examples Rashi brings. Was Rashi bringt auf Omer Lehem is das Kemoi Zacher, Shomer, the two words of Zacher and Shomer, is nit bloß Masbe die Wörter Omer Lehem, nor das es euch Agdamo zu sei zu Birchas Kainim. He's not just explaining these two words of Omer Lehem, but it's also an introduction to what the bracha of Birchas Kainim actually later is. So what is the actual bracha of Birchas Kainim? Of Yivarechacha Taich Rashi, what does Yivarechacha mean? The Eibusha should bench you. So Rashi says, your possessions should be benched. And if Yishmerecha, that you should be guarded, Rak Rashi, that bandits shouldn't come and confiscate your money. Rashi is Meirich Bezeh, this is by Abasav Adam, and Rashi continues and it's very lengthy over here, explains how this would be by a human being. If another human being gives you a gift, what kind of benefit would you have with this gift if not necessarily will the gift be safeguarded in your possession? The Eibishter gives and he safeguards it in your possession. Was the chayr is not moving. At first glance, it's not understood. The ganze Riches and Pirish Rashi. Why does Rashi have to go through this whole length here? Rashi explains that when a human being gives you a gift, so if bandits come and take it away from you, so then what benefit do you have from this gift? The chayr is das hadava poshet. It's self-understood. Was is Rashi meisif bezeh? Why does Rashi have to add and explain all of this? Why can't Rashi just simply say that the Eibishter can bench and give and keep it in your possession? Now Rashi is the mid-madgish. What Rashi is coming to emphasize with all of this is as Yivarechacha and V'yishmerecha, the two brachas. Seemingly, it seems like two separate brachas. Yivarechacha, Hashem benches you and He guards you. These are not two separate points. No, das ist ein bracha. It's really two parts of one bracha. The bracha b'shteit, what does the bracha consist of? She's baruchu nechasecha, that Hashem benches your possessions. On an anayfin, as the Eibishter hite nechasim. And the bracha is that He benches and gives you the money and safeguards it in your possession. Varam under yishmerecha, without safeguarding it in your possession, is ma'ana yeshle. So the first bracha is worthless. The Yivarecha is Kenana. You have no benefit from this. Kein bracha, so therefore it's not a bracha at all. So the Yishmerecha is not a new and separate bracha, but Yishmerecha is the fulfillment of the first bracha of the Yivarecha that Hashem gives you your possessions. So it's two brachas that go together as one. Well, Nalderech says similar afterwards. You see in Rashi, by Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasam l'cha shalom. Das ist nicht kein zwei besondere Sachen. It's not two separate brachas here. Nor, as you see it there from Rashi, ein bracha, was besteht von achiyuv und shlile. Sorry, it's one bracha that has a positive and a negative to negate the negative. When can sein v'yasam l'cha shalom? When could Hashem place peace upon you? B'shas is yisa Hashem panav elecha, which means, as Rashi says, yichposh kasei. If Hashem is able to suppress His anger, when Hashem suppresses His anger, that is, so then you'll have peace. So it goes together. That when you remove the negative of the anger, so then it brings the positive of the peace upon Yidden. So just like it is with the nusach of the bracha itself, that every bracha has two aspects to it. Removing the negative, and therefore you have the positive. So similar as Rashi Mefarish of them, was the Torah sagt, Amar Lehem, sagen die brachas, that when the pasuk says Amar Lahem, that the Kainim should say the brachas to the Yidden, as the bracha is K'mai Zacher Shamer. That the words Amar Lahem, which is an introduction to the bracha, that the nature of the bracha of Birchas Kainim is similar to Zacher and Shamer. So it's not only an example of Zacher and Shamer to the Lashon Makir of the Amar with the comments, but it's also helping us understand the nature of the bracha itself based on the two concepts of Zacher and Shamer. Zacher and Shamer from Shabbos. So just like we find regarding Zacher and Shamer of Shabbos, it's not two separate things. Not ein inyan, it goes together. The Torah says Zacher in Parshas Yisroi and Shamer in Parshas Va'eschanan, and Rashi tells us that Hashem said Zacher and Shamer together at the same time. Then is the Zacher b'shleimus. When is remembering Shabbos complete? B'shas is Dod Shamer, Shmir Shabbos. When one keeps Shabbos, so then the remembrance of Shabbos is complete. They go together by safeguarding, keeping Shabbos, not doing malacha, by keeping out the negative of the work on Shabbos. So then you have the memory and the fulfillment of Shabbos properly. So the negative and the positive go together. Al derech zeh zok Rashi in is Amar Lahem, similar is regarding the two words of Amar Lahem. Jede brache, was die keinen Menschen Yidden besteht von a chiyuv und a shmire, shlila. Every bracha that the Kainim are benching the Yidden is both together, the positive and also the safeguarding from a negative. So then in ein Indian canal, it's all one of the same thing as the Yiverechacha, Yizbarchu Nechasecha, when the Eibishter benches and the person's possessions are benched, is in an oifen from V'yishmerecha. He benches you fully to negate all negative that may come out of this. Hu ha-neisen, hu ha-shemer. The Eibishter benches and he also guards. Und dafke demult is the bracha ashleimus dege. It's only then that the bracha is full and complete. And then in continuation to this concept, the double aspect of every bracha is Rashi mefarish Amar Lehem shiyu kulam sheimim, that when you bench, all Yidden have to listen. As the achane und achshare, as the bracha zal sein boifen kazeh, to prepare and to bring it in such a way that the bracha should be in this kind of a manner, which is ein bracha. It's all one bracha was versteht von chiyuv and shmire shlila. One bracha that's a sort of a double bracha in one, the positive and negating the negative. So how do we bring such a kind of a bracha? Is b'shas as by Yidden. That's when you have by the Yidden themselves. On al derech zeh in the bracha the kavana from the Kainim, and similar regarding the Kainim themselves with the kavana that they have when they bench Yidden. Zenenda the beidet tnuas. It's a bracha that consists of both of these opposites, the chiyuv and the shmire, or the positive and the negative, in the nature of the very bracha itself. Der chiyuv, the positive is the bracha is b'lashon yachid, so that you see in the nusach of the bracha itself, the varechacha, which is in singular term. So yed neine b'miyuchad, that they should focus positively and on the needs of every individual that they bench. Sai ba'amiris kainim, this is when the kainim are speaking, and sai b'shmi is a behagish from the yidden, and that's also true when a yid listens. And what a yid has to feel is that this is a bracha coming from the Eibishter, that the kainim are benching me specifically for what I need. That's on one hand. But on the yidach, on the other hand, shiyu kulam shaimim. The kulam shaimim means that it's not me as an individual negating yourself as an individual, but you're part of the whole. You're part of the whole congregation. Which means, jede yichud, the hert, every yid has to sense, as men git a bracha zu a zweiten yidden und zu alle yidden, andere yidden, that the bracha here is being given also to another yid, to somebody else, not me, and to everybody else together. Kanal, as we mentioned before, was das is kommt al yidei atnua. So for a yid to feel this and to sense that there's others here, that the bracha is being given to, so this comes how? By a person feeling a negation. He's negating himself, der bittul shlila von seinem Metzias, by putting aside just himself and his own needs that Hashem is benching me for, but it's also others that are included, and everybody together that's included in the bracha. So we see here in the nature of the bracha itself also a chiyuv and a shlila, focusing on what I do need and what Hashem is giving me, and at the same time also putting myself aside and realizing that I'm being included in a bracha for all the Klal Yisrael together. And then b'shas is kulanu ke'echad. When a yid puts himself aside, and it's everybody being benched together, is das the keli zu b'cheinu avinu. That is the vessel for the bracha of our Father, of Hashem. Biz to the klalas habracha v'yasam l'chashalim, coming to the general bracha of Hashem, giving the yidden peace. Was is shakol keneged hakoil, and the peace is the greatest blessing that is like all against all other blessings. equivalent to all other blessings, bis to the shleimus bezeh, bis Mashiach tzidkenu, until you come to the ultimate bracha of the arrival of Mashiach. V's shalom shemoy. Chazal tell us that the name of Mashiach is shalom. V's demult v'zayin epach alamim kulam safa brura likra kulam b'shem Hashem la'avd shchem echad, that everybody will serve Hashem all together. Kimala ha'aretz deyas Hashem kamayim la'yom achasim. The world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem like the water covers the ocean.